I just had probably one of the most fun aviation experiences of my entire life. And I'm really excited to tell you all the details. But more importantly, I want you to know that everything you're about to hear me talk about, you can absolutely do this too. The best thing you can do in aviation right now is to go get your seaplane rating with TacAero. They're not paying me to say this. I just spent 3 days with them experiencing adventures that I will literally remember the rest of my life. And you will too if you go train with these guys. I mean, we got to play around on lakes, we landed on rivers, we beached it on one lake next to some other boats and just walked around on the beach. I mean, the training was just unbelievable and it was so much fun. And they have an amphibious float plane, meaning you can land on both land and water, which adds to the flexibility, but more importantly, it adds to the adventure because you can play around on lakes and rivers in the morning and then still fly back home to your home base paved airport for lunch. Really just unlocks a new kind of freedom in aviation that will just be unforgettable for you. And the crazy thing about all this is that it is located somewhere you probably wouldn't expect. It's right here in Texas. Now you probably think of horses, dirt, tumbleweed, and John Wayne when you think of Texas, and rightly so, because that's awesome and we do have those things. However, TacAero is actually based in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is a really beautiful part of the state called the Texas Hill Country. And so it actually offers some really scenic flying. You are not just flying over dirt, tumbleweeds, and John Wayne when you come to TacAero. It is a beautiful place to fly. And so the new program that TacAero just launched is a 3-day seaplane program. So the first 2 days, you're doing really awesome, immersive, and really fun training. And then on that third day, you take your check ride. So it's pretty quick, pretty efficient. Now I already have my seaplane rating, and so I didn't have to take the check ride on this particular trip, but we kind of went through the whole program and they let me film everything. So that way I could share with you what it's like.
This is the stuff that nobody appreciates.
I was flying with my instructor, Wes, who has 28,000 hours and about 3,000 of those are in float planes alone, but he's so humble and so approachable. I really, really enjoyed flying with him. And I also got to interview him so that way he could tell you more about this program in his own words, but don't just listen to what he has to say. Really throughout this video, look at the footage I'll include throughout and just imagine yourself doing this because I cannot overstate how much fun it is and the fact that you can also do this too.
We started with teaching in the seaplane with a Cessna 185 in 2017. But we found that the 185 was just too big, intimidating, not a great training airplane. Great seaplane, but not a great training airplane. In the last several months, we completed putting this Top Cub on floats, which is a great training airplane. We'll be teaching initially under Part 61, but we have a 141 curriculum, and as soon as we have gone through the proving phase, we'll be adding that to our 141 class.
So what can someone expect? They want to come train with TacAero, do a Part 61 seaplane rating. What does that look like with you guys?
It's looking about 3 days of flying. We have a curriculum of PowerPoints for our ground school. It ends up being about 3 to 4 hours of ground school, and then flying the airplane. Most of the work we do in the airplane involves the water. In the air, the seaplane flies pretty similar to its land plane counterpart. The new material is all to do with operating on and the water in that environment.
So about how many hours would you end up flying the seaplane in this program?
We're expecting the average to be about 7 hours. I really like the idea of doing it in an amphibious airplane because a seaplane rating qualifies a person to fly a straight float plane or an amphib. And there's some extra caution with an amphibious airplane. An amphibious airplane, I look at it as a seaplane with extendable landing gear. It's an important mindset to believe you're a seaplane. The biggest mistake we can make with an amphib, and the insurance claims back this up, is a gear down landing in the water. It will cause the airplane to flip over on its back immediately. A gear up landing is a normal landing for us in the water. But a gear down landing is a normal landing for us too on land. There are no squat switches because there are times you need to retract the gear in the water, say coming off of a ramp or something like that. So you don't have the warning horns that a conventional land plane with retractable gear has. So saying every single landing, this is a water landing, wheels are up, and verifying it is an important aspect of protecting the airplane and ourselves. We will do very basic air work because this is an additional rating. The rating itself, there's no written test, there's no time requirement, it's to proficiency. You still need to show the very basics of turns, understanding and recovering from stalls and that kind of stuff. So we'll hit that very, very briefly. The rest is the water work. It all starts as you approach a landing area, surveying it.
As I fly down this river, I'm looking at it, evaluating it, checking out the features that I see, the colors of the obvious shallow areas, the sandbars and the rocks, because all of this stuff adds to your knowledge.
We don't have a team of FAA people out there checking for clearances and runway condition and alignment and all of the nuances that go into an airport. We have to figure that out on our own. Or rarely is there ever a weather station or an AWOS. Learning to read the wind off of the water, checking for the depth, checking for obstructions, watching out for boats, moving targets at times. Those are the things that happen early on, the first things as you approach a landing area. Establishing and defining where you want to land, in your mind making a runway on the water, using that to help guide you through the pattern. If you fly a pattern similar to what we do with a land plane, it's familiar and it works better. The concept of the stabilized approach does work. We are free to choose our own directions and modifications as we desire. In fact, often you have to make those switches because of surrounding terrain, or it might be a neighborhood that's underneath the approach on the shoreline and you can come from the opposite side to be a good neighbor. So there's a surprising number of extra factors to bring on in there. The seaplane has a lot more drag than its land plane counterpart. It's heavier because the floats are heavier than the landing gear. So they tend to descend more quickly. They lose airspeed more quickly. So there's a little difference in timing. We are literally sitting on two boats underneath this airplane. And like a speedboat, they want to be in the water at a certain angle. And the attitude of the airplane is how we determine that. So we have a window, we call it the sweet spot, where it works best. Touching down at that attitude, the sweet spot attitude, gives us the best and safest landing. We can maintain power and taxi like a speedboat, make turns. It's a lot of fun. It can allow you to travel a significant distance across the water.
Oh, this is really cool.
Once we get to a place settling off of the step, that's what we call being on plane and high-speed taxi, into the idle taxi, learning to work with the wind, position the controls. As we want to come into a beach or a dock, learning to work with Mother Nature, because she will always win. These are the nuances that we practice with the airplane. Other things that we look at are like rough water takeoffs and landings. Slightly analogous to a soft field takeoff in the land plane or landing. And then probably most importantly is dealing with glassy water. The glassy water landings, ironically, are far more dangerous because it's like landing on an infinite mirror. You can't tell the difference between 2 inches and 20 feet, which is critical for flaring and landing in an airplane. The technique that we use works extremely well. We make our patterns in over good visual references, and as you cross the shoreline onto the water, you set up the landing attitude and use power to establish a safe rate of descent, and you just fly to the water under those conditions. It uses distance because it takes more time, but it makes a safe operation out of it. That's a big thing we look at. Our curriculum was developed using the ACS, which is the flight test guide used by the FAA. It details all of the subject areas that you must cover. And we make sure we cover all of them, get a person comfortable with all of those aspects. And it's not a huge list. For someone that's doing an add-on, there's a table in the back of the ACS that lists exactly what they are. Most of them I've already talked about here in our little chat.
So do you feel like people can reasonably get ready and develop some of that kind of feel in the context of a few hours?
Yep, majority of our training is flying on and off the water. So it is the water work. We're not trying to teach somebody how to fly, we're teaching them how to do it on the water. So the people that transition most quickly usually have boating experience, particularly if they have experience with sailboats, because they're used to working with the wind, working with Mother Nature. But anyone who flies can learn that stuff fairly quickly. It's not, I have a friend who is actually a rocket scientist, but it is not rocket science. Pre-flighting of a seaplane is a lot different than in a land plane. The airplane itself is about the same, other than that you can't reach up to the wing. It's just so high unless you have a ladder. If it's in the water, you can only reach the side if you have a dock. You turn it around or something like that. There are extra brace wires and structural components to look at, the retractable water rudders on nearly all airplanes. But most importantly, water is heavy. It weighs about 8 pounds a gallon. So it doesn't take a lot to increase your weight significantly. But even more importantly is the length of the float. This float is nearly 18 feet long. If you have 10 gallons of water in the bow, that's 80 pounds incredibly far forward to your center of gravity. It will take you out of the center of gravity range in a heartbeat. Same with the tails of the floats, the compartments at the back. Each float is divided into several different watertight compartments. It definitely is more successful than the Titanic. And we have a pump and a place to pull the water out of each of those compartments. So that's an important part of the pre-flight, even if you haven't been in the water. If it's been out on the ram, rain will accumulate in the floats. This is a Cub Crafters CC-18. It's called a Top Cub. The Cub Crafters developed the airplane after many, many years of modifying and restoring, upgrading Super Cubs. And they decided to build and certify their own airplane. And they've done a great job with it. This has some structural differences from the Super Cub, allowing a gross weight of 2,300 pounds with a very, very similar original empty weight. The floats themselves, these smaller whip lines, weigh a bit over 400 pounds with the amphibious landing gear in them. We take off about 100 and something pounds worth of wheels to put them on. So that's a net increase in the empty weight of the airplane of around 300 pounds. With that high gross weight, we still have around 700 pounds useful load in this airplane. So we're not concerned with 2 people and reduced fuel to fly this airplane. It still handles very much like a Super Cub in most respects. The engine is 180 horse Lycoming. We do have a climb propeller on this airplane, which really helps with the takeoffs and the climbs. Cruise speed is not our forte. You typically cruise at a blistering 88 miles an hour. But you're down low where you can see the countryside and enjoy the scenery, catch glimpses of interesting things that you miss flying at higher speeds and higher altitudes. This is truly enjoying the journey.
So for the person that has never flown in a float plane before, but this is a bucket list item for them, when they go land on the water for the first time, what do you see your students typically experiencing?
They're, quote, blown away. The approach coming in low over the land and stuff is often uncomfortable for people. And so they get a little apprehensive at first, but then you touch down on the water and it's usually a nice smooth touchdown, and you run out a little ways, come off the step and settle down in the water, and you look out the window and see the spray on the floats, and it's like, wow, this is so cool.
Oh, it's so fun.
And it just on and on like that. And you get to do that in a beautiful place. Being on a lake somewhere, it just adds to it. Most people just can't believe they're doing it.
If you fly with TacAero and get your seaplane rating, I promise it will be some of the best 3 days of your life. So you can learn more over on their website at TacAero.com, and I'll also put a link to that down in the description. And so after going through their program, there were some really big differences between seaplanes and land planes that stood out to me that are really fresh on my mind because I just went through this. So I'm putting a whole video together talking about those differences, so that way you'll know what to expect in case this is something you want to do one day. So when that video is ready, it'll be on the screen. And in the meantime, there's another video there right now that I think you will also enjoy. So I'll see you over in that video.